Hey ukramedia family, Sergey Prakhnevsky here, and today I want to talk about shape layers. So before we go any further, I do want to talk about vectors and rasters. Now, if you understand the difference between the two, it'll make a lot more sense when you look at shapes and solids. Vectors are just lines and curves. That's what we refer to as vectors. So things like Illustrator file would be a vector, and also text would be a vector. It's something that you can scale, and as you scale, it still has the same detail. It doesn't get blurry or pixelated. Now, rasters, on the other hand, are things like images like JPEG, Photoshop files, so anything that deals with pixels. So rasters are made out of pixels. This file right here is raster, and it has 262 pixels on the X and 262 on the Y. And if you have it at 100%, it looks perfect. It looks crisp. It has that detail. However, if you go past 100, that's where you're gambling. So if I go further, you can see it starts pixelating on me. Vectors, on the other hand, that's why they're so good, because you can use them for logos and stuff like that. It doesn't matter how big or small they are. So if I scale this, you can see it still maintains the detail. It's still pretty sharp and it looks pretty crisp. Now, it is important to point out that the effects you apply on a vector file and raster file have different effects. And the reason why, because when you apply an effect on a raster layer, that effect is calculated on a buffer that matches the size of the source. For example, I'll show you an example. I have this CC banded. So if I apply this on a raster file, and if I adjust these points right here, and if I do bend, notice when I go past the boundaries, it doesn't go past it. That's what I mean by that the effect is calculated on the buffer that matches the size of the source. So it doesn't go past the size of the source. However, there is an effect you can use called grow bounds, and you can literally grow the boundary like that. So you have to put it before that effect, and then you can kind of grow the influence, right? So you can fix it that way, but on its own, it doesn't go past it. However, that's not the case for vector files. Now, if I do CC bended, if I apply the same thing on the vector, and if I adjust these two, so something like this, okay. And if I do bend, notice it does go past the boundaries. So really, that's the difference, because when you apply an effect on a vector, that effect is calculated on a dynamic buffer that matches the size of the composition. So instead of being married to the boundaries of the source, it goes to the whole composition. All right, so now that you know more about vectors and rasters, I think it's a good time for me to talk about shape layers and solids. So shape layers are vectors, and now you know what vectors are. So that's what shape layers are. And then solids are rasters, and now you know what rasters do and what they are. So shape layers deal with lines and curves, and then solids deal with pixels. Well, the thing about solids and shape layers, when you create them, certain things happen. For example, when you create a solid, it would basically treat it like an image. So it's the same thing as you bringing in an image into your composition or into After Effects. The first thing you would do, you would bring it into your project panel, it would live here, and then you would drag it into your composition. So that's how it works. Well, when you create a solid, it basically creates a solid in your composition, but it also puts it in your project panel, because solids are a subclass of footage source. And what that means is it has a source. So even though you have it in your composition, it still comes from something like a project panel. So for example, I'm going to create a new solid, and to do that, you can either right click and then go to new and then solid, or you can use a keyboard shortcut, Control Y, and then you can adjust the width, the height, the name, the color. So I'm going to keep it as is, 300 by 300, hit OK. So now we have a solid in our composition. I'm going to shift it over here. Notice that we have a folder now called solids. And inside of this folder, we have our solid right here. So we've created a solid. It's a subclass of a footage source, and it created it in our project panel. However, with shape layers, it's a little different. Now, shape layers are, I guess what you would say, a subclass of a AV layer. Now, I don't want to get too technical. I've heard people refer to it as static layer. And what that basically means, it means that it doesn't have a source. And that means that it won't live in the project panel. So when you create a shape layer in your composition, it will live in your composition. It's a blessing and a curse in a lot of ways. For example, like solids are great placeholders. You know, you can put them in your 3D scene for whatever, just a placeholder. And then when you're ready to replace that solid for an image, you can quickly do that from project panel. So you can select, for example, I want this image to replace the solid. I would select it, hold down Alt on my keyboard, and then drag and drop on top of this solid. And when you do that, it will automatically replace this solid anywhere in the composition. So that is a great feature that, you know, solids have. You can't do that with shape layers because shape layer, again, is just by itself. It doesn't have a source. So to create a shape layer, you can select it in here or whatever. It doesn't matter. So I'm going to select a rectangle, and you can also draw a shape layer, but rectangle for right now. And you can either double click to make it full size of your composition, or you can just draw like this, right? And then you can go in here and adjust the size of it. Let's do the same size, so 300 by 300. That's good. So pretty simple. And you can see side by side, these two are identical. You can't really tell the difference which one's which unless you look at over here. So you can see that's a shape layer and that's a raster. Shape layer is not, you know, it doesn't have a source. So you can't really replace anything, you know, it won't allow you. So that is a limitation. However, it's the same thing as vectors. You know, this is vector. So if you do bend it, and if you set it up the way we did it before, and if you bend, you can see it goes past the boundaries of your source. However, that's not the case for the solid. So if you do the same thing, again, adjust it, and if you bend, you can see it doesn't. Let's talk about parametric and Bezier shape paths. So what are they? So parametric shapes are these shapes right here. So any of these are parametric shapes. For example, I'm going to select Star tool, and I'm going to draw me a star. So this star is a parametric shape. I can go inside of this star and play with these parameters like star polygon. So now it's going to give me a polygon. Go back to star. I can play with the amount of points I want. Or I can play with the inner radius, extend that a bit, outer radius. So you get the idea. All of these are awesome. Like inner roundness, you can adjust the roundness, and then outer roundness. So this is definitely powerful, and it gives you the ability to quickly get the shape that you want. You can keyframe this, for example, inner radius, something like that, right? You can keyframe and get something interesting here, right? So it's definitely useful, and it's pretty accurate. However, if you want to select vertices, you can't really do that. That's where you would have to convert to Bezier. But these things are pretty accurate. For example, we love parametric rectangle. For example, I'm going to go over here and select this rectangle tool, and I'm actually going to double click, and I'm going to go inside of this rectangle path. We have this size. Now this size is super awesome because it's very accurate, and I do like accuracy because I can use that in my expressions. In other words, I can't use the scale property, right? This scale, it just goes from 0 to 100. It doesn't give me the, you know, the exact size of this shape. Now this one does. For example, my composition is 1920 by 1080. If I press Control K, you can see that's what I get, 1920 by 1080. And right now, this shape is the exact same size as my composition, so it's 1920 by 1080. So it's accurate on pixels. So if I want something 500 pixels by 500 pixels, it gives me the exact shape. So you can do that with solids, but you have to constantly adjust. You don't have a live option like you do here. In other words, you can't really attach, you can't really change it in your timeline like that with solids. You can with shape layers. And the cool thing about this, you can actually use expressions. So for example, I'm going to press Control T and bring up a text. And I'm going to type, let's do ukramedia.com, and I'm going to select it, and then do Control Alt Home to center the pivot point, Control Home to center the text. And now I can tell for this shape to be the exact same size as my text. All I have to do is just alt click on the stopwatch for this size property. And in here I can say X, you're going to be, and then I'm going to pick whip to this ukramedia.com text, and I'll tell it to be the source rect at time. That's a method. And then I'll tell it to be the width. So basically I'm saying X, you're going to be the width of this text. And then I'm going to copy this, Control C, and then Control V and paste, replace Y. And instead of width, we're going to do height. Okay. And then underneath here, we're going to define this. So we're going to say X, Y. In other words, X is going to be this value and Y is going to be that value. So put the width of my text here and the height of my text there. So when I click away, now you can see it's perfect. So whatever I type in here, like ukramedia.com. So it gives me exactly what I want. And that's what parametric shape does. It gives you the exact size that you want. So that's parametric shape, but let's kind of segue into Bezier shapes. So what are those? I already mentioned it, that Bezier shapes give you kind of more options as far as moving vertices and stuff like that. So I can convert, and I'm going to get rid of all this, like a parametric shape into a Bezier shape. So I can select, let's do a star, right? I can draw a star. It's a parametric shape. I can play around with all these parameters and get what I want. And then I can just right click here and say convert to Bezier path. And when you do that, then all those options go away and you no longer have the ability to control those options. Obviously you lose it and you can't really go back, but you can control like the vertices and stuff like that. You can control that and you can keyframe that stuff. So you can easily, I guess, go over here and select these and kind of move them around and keyframe them. So it'll go from this to that. I know a lot of people ask me is like, how do you separate the two vertices? For example, like, yeah, I can't really disconnect these. I want to keep going. I can't really do that, but you can, you just have to select the two vertices that you want. For example, these two, and then you would have to go to layer, or actually you can just right click here and go to mask and shape path. And where it says closed, just uncheck that. And now those are separated and you can just select one, press G to bring up the pen tool and you can keep drawing. So that's nice. So you can also draw a Bezier shape using the pen tool. So G, click on that icon here, and then you can draw whatever you want. However, sometimes I know people struggle with that one as well. When you draw this, you have all of this and you don't have those handles to control, right? Because this one is what it's called RotoBezier. And that can mess people up. If you didn't uncheck this in the beginning, you think you're done. Like for example, I'm going to get rid of this again. Right now I have it checked and that RotoBezier is checked and it gives me interesting look here. It gives me entirely different kind of experience. But if I have this checkbox unchecked, now all of a sudden, right, it doesn't make it, I guess, round automatically. Now you have to draw your own kind of shape with all these handles and stuff like that. So that's nice. But what if you want to go back to RotoBezier? How would you do that? And the same thing, just select your path and then right click and go to mask and shape path and select this RotoBezier. And when you do that, it's going to do, it's going to go back to this RotoBezier. Now you can still adjust like the sharpness of your points. All you have to do, make sure you have your pen tool selected, and then you can hold Alt and then click and drag, and you can kind of make it more round, or you can make it more sharp. The same thing for that. You can make it sharp by just scrolling left and right, or up and down, whatever it is. Or you can just click on it like that. It will automatically make them sharp. Let's talk about fill and stroke. So when you create a shape layer in After Effects, it automatically comes with three things: a path, stroke, and fill. Now I can quickly prove this to you. You can control things in here quickly, whatever you want. So you have a fill, stroke, and then you can select a shape that you want. So I'm going to do rectangle tool, create one really quick. And then after you created it, you have all these options. So if I go over here, you can see that we have path, stroke, and fill. So it comes with three things. Path by itself is just path. If I turn this fill off, you can see it's just a path. It doesn't matter what I do to it. If I make the corners rounded, or if I scale it up or down, if I let go, you can see that I can't see anything because it's just a path. It doesn't have anything. If you hit render, you won't see anything. However, that's why we have this fill right here. We can turn this on and now we have a fill, and now we can see our path. And we can also turn on the stroke and then we can see the stroke. Now we can adjust options for the stroke in here and the same for the fill, but we can also quickly adjust the same elements in here. As long as you select your layer, you can adjust it in here as well. So for example, I can go to this fill, I can click on it, and now I can turn off the fill entirely and just see the stroke, which is good. I can just go to solid, so solid color. I can go and make it linear gradient and also radial gradient. So I'm going to keep it at linear for right now, hit OK. And if you have your move tool selected, press V on your keyboard, you can actually visually adjust your gradient, linear gradient. And the same thing goes for radial, right? That would be the center, and then you can extend it. So that's super awesome. And you can actually add colors in there. You can click on this solid and you can keep it as is, or you can change the colors, maybe something like that. You can insert colors by clicking on it and you can create something different. and so on. So the sky is the limit what you can do with this. You can go back to linear and do all kinds of stuff. Now the same thing applies for stroke. You can click on it here, you can make it solid or linear gradient, radial, and so on. So you get the idea. You can change the color of it in here. Let's do something like red. Actually, let's keep it white. And then we can also adjust the size of it. Now the same options we have there, we also have here, like I said, and I'm actually gonna go to stroke here, and stroke has more options than you see up there. For example, obviously we can control the size of it, but we can also control the line cap and a line join. Now to do that, we're actually gonna collapse this down. So I'm gonna convert to Bezier path. So now it's not a parametric shape, and we just see our vertices. We can select them, move them around. I can select another one, shift, select, and then right click and go to mask and shape path and make it open. So now we have an opening here. And in fact, I'm going to need a sharper edge. So I'm going to make this sharp. Okay, so for this example, I'm going to show you these two properties, what they do. So right now, this line cap, really, if I change it from butt to round, notice it makes it round on the edges, which is awesome. Now look at this. This one is pretty sharp. But if I go to this line join, and if I make that one round, you can see it rounds it up as well. So it definitely has more control there as well. We can adjust the size and play around with dashes. So I can say plus right here, and then I can create dashes. So if I move on the slider, we can create big ones, like long ones, or shorter ones. And then we can also offset these. So these can be very useful for animation. You can do like a time expression. So you can alt click here and just say time times, let's do like 100. It might be a little fast. Let's see. And you can see that it's moving. The great thing about stroke in parametric shapes is that it doesn't matter the size of your parametric shape, the stroke size stays the same. For example, if I go to the size of my parametric shape, and if I increase it, it doesn't matter how big the shape gets, the size of the stroke is still the same. However, that's not the case for the scale property of my layer. So if I take this down to 50 by 50, and if I increase the scale property of it, you can see that the stroke size increases. So you definitely want to play around with only the size of your parametric shape. Now there's a new feature that After Effects added that's basically centers the anchor point when you create a new shape layer in your composition. For example, I'm going to select one of these shape tools like rectangle tool. And when I draw one in my composition like this, you can see that the anchor point by default is in the center of my composition. However, you can always use like a shortcut, Control-Alt-Home, right? If you do that, it centers the anchor point to your shape. But there's even better option. All you have to do is just go to your preferences, Control-Alt, and then semicolon. Or you can also go here by Edit and then Preferences and then General. So in here, you have an option called Center Anchor Point in New Shape Layers. So when you have that checked, and you press OK. So let me undo all of this. And now I'm going to create a new shape. So watch this. So when I create one, you can see that it automatically centers the anchor point to my shape, which is super awesome. Let's talk about what I call advanced masking. So for this, I'm going to create a new shape. Any of these would work, but I'm going to go with rectangle, just create a new shape, and I'm going to convert it to Bezier path. So now we have that shape. And next, what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually draw a mask on top of my shape layer. Now, I'm still surprised that many people still don't know that you can draw masks on top of a shape layer. The only thing you have to do, you have to choose, obviously, if you want to do like a shape or a pen tool. And then after that, you have to go over here and make sure that it's not on this icon and it's on this tool creates mask icon. So you select this and then you can draw any kind of mask that you want. Something like this is good. In fact, I'm going to press M. Do you hear the thunder? It's storming pretty bad here. So I'm going to change the color of it so you can see better. So that's the mask. All right. Now, I don't know if you've been there, but I have, to where you created something and you masked something out and it went past your solid or your shape and you kind of wish like, hey, that would have been great if I can extend it somehow without going through all kinds of problems. Well, you can. All you have to do is just go to your mask and select this mask path and then do Control-C to copy it. Wow, it's storming bad. I don't know if you hear this. And then do Control-C to copy it and then go to Shape and then go to Rectangle and then Path. And then select this and do Control-V to paste. And now you can actually get rid of your mask. You can see that it pasted it right on top of your mask. And now instead of it being a mask, it's actually a shape. The awesome thing about After Effects is that it allows us to convert text and vector layers into shape layers. And let me show you what I'm talking about. For this example, I have text and vector logo. So I'm going to select this text, right click and go to create, and then click on this create shapes from text. When you do that, it's going to create a shape layer right above of our text. It hides this text, and then all of that is shape layer. So you can zoom in, you can go inside of it here, you can select vertices and do all kinds of stuff. So for example, you can move things around, you can get rid of them, and who knows what you want to do. I mean, you can, I don't know, adjust things and create something interesting. So you can do that in seconds. You can do the same thing for the vector layers as well. You can right click on it and then go to create, and then create shapes from vector layer. So when you do that, again, the same thing, it creates a shape layer right above our vector layer. And then you can go and double click and adjust things in here as well. So you can select these vertices, you can move on things, and the sky is the limit. The awesome thing about shape layers is that you can move paths from After Effects into Illustrator and then alter it there, do whatever, use whatever tools you have in Illustrator. And then after you're done, you can import it into After Effects without ever exporting anything out of After Effects. So let me show you what I'm talking about here. So I'm going to press Control-T to bring up the type tool, and I'm just going to type letter U, and then I'm going to press Control-Enter to get out of edit mode. And I'm going to move this over here. And next, I'm going to convert this into a shape. So I'm going to go to create and then create shapes from text. So now we have a shape layer. So I'm going to go inside here and I'm going to select the path of this U. So I have it selected, Control-C to copy it. And now I'm going to go to Illustrator. So in here, I'm going to paste it, Control-V. And now we have our U shape in here. So I'm going to give it a color real quick so we can see things much better. And next what I'm going to do, I'm going to select these 4 vertices and I'm just going to adjust the roundness like this. That's all I'm going to do. And after I'm done, I'm going to select all of them and do Control-C to copy it. And then I'm going to go back to After Effects and then select the path again and do Control-V to paste. And so now you can see that we quickly took something out of After Effects, brought into Illustrator and altered it using Illustrator tools, and we brought it back in no time. Let's talk about working with multiple shapes. And to be honest with you, I feel like this subject right here is where a lot of people struggle with. So I'm going to try to camp here and kind of shine a light on some stuff. So I'm going to create a new shape and I'm going to do it differently just to show you another way of doing it. So I'm going to right click over here on the timeline, new, and then new shape layer. So click here and right away it creates this little dot right here. So it doesn't have anything. It's like a blank shell, right? It's just a shape layer with nothing in it. So no contents, nothing. And then you kind of dress it up. So then you can go to add and you can see all of these options. It's the same thing you see here. So I'm going to click here and then you get to pick. The first thing we're going to do is just the path. So we can do rectangle, ellipse, polystar, and path. So path is where you draw the shape you want. So I'm going to go with rectangle, and right away you can see it created a rectangle, but it's a path. So it doesn't have anything, it's blank. So next we have to do, again, remember the 3 things, path, and then fill and stroke. So we're going to get to fill next. So let's add a fill to this. So then I'm going to go to add again, and now we're going to move up to the second stage here, or I guess third at this point. So let's go and add fill. So when you do that, it creates a fill. So now we have a fill. We can play with the size, roundness, all of that stuff. So we can see what we're actually doing, and we can actually render this and we can see it. All right, so next let's go to add again, and let's add stroke. So now we have stroke. We can adjust the size of it here. And again, the same stuff you can do here as well. I just wanted to show you that you can do it other ways. And obviously, next what we want to do is group this. So we can either select the first one, hold shift and select the last one, and then do Control-G and group it that way. Or you can create an empty group. You can just go, again, the same thing, add, and then go to group empty, and it creates like an empty one right here. You can put it at the top, select the other 3, and then drop it in there. And then you can select it, press enter, or you can rename it to rectangle. And there you have it. So essentially, it's the same thing as us selecting one of these, like this rectangle, and drawing it. And as you can see, obviously, you want to make sure you select, the same layer here. When you draw it, you can see it creates the same one, and it has all of these options in here. So the same thing we just created, it creates it for you. Like this is what we created, and that's what it created for us. So it's identical, the same thing, but obviously you have more control. You can kind of choose what you want. You don't even need to have stroke if you don't want to. You can completely get rid of it. So now that you know how to create it from scratch, so let's move this around. So I'm going to select this one, move it over here. Let's create more. So right now we created already 2 shapes in 1 shape layer. And I know at this point a lot of people get confused because you have a layer and then you have shapes within that layer. So just think of it this way. It's kind of like grouping, right? You have this one layer. It holds two of them at this point right now. And then this one, it has its own shape, and then you can go inside and it has its own transform properties, scale, everything that the layer has. So think of it just another layer within this layer. It's kind of nice because it kind of helps you to clean the clutter in your timeline. So then the same thing for this, the same stuff. It has its own stroke, fill, transform properties. So really, you just select this and then you can go into each one of them and control it individually, right? You can change the color and the size of the stroke and all of that. So you can add more. You can select this and hit G to reveal the pen tool, or you can click on this icon and you can draw something else, just something different. All right, so we have another shape. Again, it created this shape. So again, we can go into it, right? And then we can change the color of it. And let's do another one. Let's draw quite a few actually. So I'm going to draw something like this. Let's draw another one, like a triangle. Let's flatten these, okay? So let's do something like this. Basically, I'm just drawing random stuff. And again, the same thing here. We can double click here and select each one. We can change the colors. Now, the way this works, so if you want to select the shape layer, you click once and you selected the shape layer. So we are on top of the shape layer. Now, if you want to go deep into each shape layer in here within the shape layer, you would just double click and now you're at the other stage. So now you can select all of these. However, it gets even more complicated. For example, I'm going to select all of these and I'm going to move them up here so they're at the very top. Okay, then I can group them. So I can do Control G and now it grouped them. So now we have the first stop, the very top shape layer. And then if we double click, we get to this stage. So in this stage, we have these individual ones. And then we also have a group. So when I select this, I can't select individual elements within this group because we're at this stage. So to go into the group, we have to double click and now we can select things within the group. So even if I am in this group and let's say I select both of these and I group them again, Control G, right? So now let's start at the very top. So first I click on the shape. So we're at the very top shape layer. I just want to show you how you access the hierarchy of things, how you access shapes within a shape layer. So right now we're at the very top, we're at the very, the root of the shape layer. Then we double click, now we're at this stage, right? We can select individual ones and the group one. Then we can go inside of that group, that's another stage, right? The hierarchy of things. You can double click and now we can select these two individual because they're not grouped. Now this one is grouped, so we're there now. I can double click there and to go into that. So I can select all of them. But at this point, we're at the very bottom of the chain. And when we're at the bottom of the chain, we can still select all the other shapes. But for example, if I select this shape, I automatically get to that level. And now this one is a group. If I click on this one, I automatically get up to that level. And then that is a whole group thing. So you kind of have to learn that you're moving up and down the chain. I know it's confusing, but it will make sense as you do this daily. So for example, if I want to select vertices of these, I just double click. Now I'm in this group, right? I double click and then I can select individual ones. So at this point, once I have the selected individual shape, I can just click on a vertice and then I can move it around if it's a path and not parametric shape like these. Let's talk about shape attributes or shape operations, whatever you call it, but this one is definitely my favorite. And for this example, I have a shape layer that I took the text and basically converted to shapes. And as you can see, each letter is a shape. So it's all like a group. So it's important that you know this. So let's talk about shape operations. And by the way, before we do that, so we talked about the group empty, we talked about the paths, we talked about the fill, the stroke, the gradients. So we've covered all of this. Now we're going to talk about operations or shape attributes. Again, whatever you want to call it. So these are easy and pretty simple to use. You get it right away. You know what a repeater is and stuff like that. So I'm not going to go over every single operation, but I will show you how they work. So for example, I'm going to use this first one. Let's do offset paths. So I'm going to select this content, go add, and then offset paths. And so when you do that, what it does, it drops it at the very bottom. And as you can see, all of these shapes are affected by it. So we can go over here and we can kind of adjust, right, the offset. And so the important thing to point out here is that whatever you have above this operation, that's what's going to be affected by it. So if you move it, let's say just one shape, you can see that A is ignored. If you put it in between media and Ukra, you can see that everything above that, which is Ukra, is affected, and then everything below is ignored. So that's really consistent with all the other operations. So it's important that you know that. So that alone is huge. Okay, so let's say you wanted to apply this to only letter R. Now you can put it right below it and it will get it. However, it will also get the other shapes. So what you want to do is put it inside of this group like this. And then it only affects the letter R. So that's pretty simple. Now let's talk about some other ones. Let's do repeater. Again, make sure you select the content, go to repeater, and now it drops it at the very bottom. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and let's go to repeater transform properties, and let's move this to the left a little bit. Like that. Okay, so that's good. You can see it repeated it, and it's exactly what I'm going for. But again, the exact same thing. It repeated everything above it. So if I put this in between media and Ukra, you can see it only affects Ukra and not media. You can also put it in just R, and it will only do it for the R. Or if you do it for, let's say, E, it will do only for that letter E. So you get the idea here. I'm just trying to, I know I'm being repetitive here. No pun intended. But anyway, so let's go over another one. So let's go to add, and then let's try twist. Again, make sure you select content. I know if you don't, if you select this, it's going to drop it inside there and things get complicated. So select that, go to add, and then go to, what did I say? Twist. So now we can twist, we can do all of that stuff. It affects everything. However, if you put it in between media and Ukra, then it only affects Ukra, and so on. So you get the concept. You can play around with all of them. But the other two that I really want to go over would be merge paths and trim paths. So for that, I'm going to create something different. So I'm going to create a new shape. So I'm going to select, let's do rectangle, and let's do a star. So something like this. And notice they're over the top of each other and they're right here. So what if I wanted to use this star right here and cut out a hole in this rectangle, the shape of the star? So how would I do that? And obviously this is where you would use this merge path. So again, make sure you select contents, go to add, and then select this merge paths. So when you do that, it's going to drop it right underneath those two, and automatically you can see it created a new fill. So this is how basically it ignores all the other colors you had, and you have to create a new one, right? So a pink one this time. But if I turn this off, nothing happening. So this merge path is right underneath it. So again, it's going to affect everything above. And the way it works, it basically takes this one and it cuts whatever is above it. So right now rectangle is going to cut, but I want the star to be the cutting shape. So it's going to cut the this rectangle. So what I'm going to go to this merge paths, and then instead of add, I'm going to do subtract. So as you can see, it subtracts this star shape from the rectangle, which is exactly what I want. Then I can do intersect, and it intersects, and then I can do exclude intersections, something like that. So you get the idea here. So it's pretty simple. Again, the same concept. Whatever is above is going to be affected. Now watch what happens when I add more shapes. So for example, let's do a circle. So I'm going to add a big circle here. And instead of, let's do subtract. Okay, so now notice the star and the rectangle both are cutting the circle. So whatever shapes you have, however many you have, they're all going to cut the very last or first one, however you look at it, that's what's going to be cut. Now, another one I want to talk about, let me get rid of all of this. I'm going to draw, let's do a circle. Okay, and I'm going to add, let's get rid of fill, and let's add a stroke. So we have a stroke. So the other one here, just one shape, nothing complicated. So we can go to add and then create or add this, where's that, trim paths. So this one is my favorite. I use it all the time. And I guess you can keep it there if you want to. But what it does, it basically trims your path. And again, the same concept is going to affect whatever is above. You can either have it here or you can get it out of that group and put it underneath here. And then it'll do the exact same thing. Again, these operations are very easy to use, but you just have to understand how they work. And I think by watching this, definitely clear things out for you. So definitely try all of them and see what you can do with them. Let's talk about converting points into nulls. Now, it's one of the newest features of After Effects, and I find it super useful. And really, now you can have access to the points using expressions. And I'm not going to touch on the expression side of things, but I will introduce you to a script that is very useful. So for this example, you want to make sure you have that script up. I already have it in here, but you can go to Window and then click on this Create Nulls from Paths at the very bottom. So once you have that, you'll have something like this. You'll have 3 buttons. And first, let's create some kind of shape. I'm going to press G to get the pen tool. You can click on that. And then let's create something like this. So again, very simple. We have 4 points. Now what I want to do, I want to convert these points into nulls so that I can control them outside of this path in my timeline. So to do that, I'm going to press Control and then click on this triangle to collapse all of my properties, and then select this property, path property, hit S twice to solo it, and then while you have your property selected, we're gonna play with these options in here. So the first one is points follow nulls. So when you click on this, right away you see nulls created right above the shape layer, and these nulls actually control the shape itself. So you can click on one of them and then move them, and as you can see, it moves the shape, which is super awesome. The same thing for all the other ones as well. So now you can animate them in your timeline and create some interesting animations. So I'm going to undo all of this and let's explore some more. So I'm going to select this path again. So it is important that you select it. And then we're going to go to the second one, nulls follow points. So when you click on that, again, it's going to do the exact same thing. It's going to create nulls right above your shape layer, and these nulls are attached to your point. But the thing is, you can't really select the null and move it now. The only way it'll move if you select one of these points. So if you select one point and move it in here, notice that null moved with it. Now that comes in handy for a lot of things. For example, you can press Ctrl-C and bring in some kind of text like ukramedia, okay? And then what you can do, just parent to one of these nulls. So Shift parent to one of these. So now it's snapped to that null. And I'm gonna zoom out a little bit. So now if I go into the shape, right, select the path, and I can control like this point right here. So when I move it, you can see that this text moves with the point, which is huge. You can animate the points and then you can attach things to it. Let's explore the very last one, which is, let's do trace path. So that one. So again, make sure the path is selected, click on this trace path. And this time you have a null that kind of traces your path around this shape. It can be very useful for a lot of things. So you can, again, create the text. You can say something like ukramedia, and then you can shift parent to the null, and now it'll move with it. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is a script called smartREKT. Now, it is a script that I developed with the help of my friend Tim Thiessen. This script is super helpful if you work with shape layers. Now, the reason why I created it because I saw the need for it. And so let me show you what it does. So before I show you the script, I kind of want to talk about the challenges that I faced and why I created it. So if you use shape layers in After Effects, for example, rectangle tool, and if you create it, right, you have a rectangle tool, it has some cool options, but to get to the size, you're going to have to hike down and, you can adjust it, but they're all kind of on the same property. So you have to separate things and you can still do it with the expression. So there's, obviously it's not a problem. However, the other problem that I had, it only extrudes from the center, right? The rectangle extrudes from the center, and that can be a bit problematic. Again, an expression can fix it, and I've done it before, but it's just a lot of work to get to that point. So I saw these challenges, and I got tired of it. So I created this script called smartREKT, and it is right here, just literally one button. That's all it is. And if you click on it, it creates a shape. And in the effects control panel right here, you can have all of these options in here, and you can adjust the X size, the Y size, and also the roundness, the skew. So you get the idea. Now, really my favorite feature is this anchor point. And right now it's set to bottom left. So this anchor is at the bottom left. And because of that, it's extruding, you can see from the left going to the right, and then from the bottom going upwards like this. So that's pretty cool. But instantly you can go here and select any other points in here. So you can say, let's go to top left, and then it's going to go to the top left. And then you can extrude again to the right from that anchor point and then downwards. So again, you can go center and can do the same thing, center. Again, I'm doing this quickly on the fly, and you can do bottom center. So now it's at the bottom center. Now it's extruding from the center and then upwards. So these options are super useful, and you can create things on the fly. However, that's not the end of it. You can also do the following. So I'm going to get rid of this. And what if I have like a text or an image, footage? In this case, I'm just going to use a text. So I'm going to press Control T and I'm going to type, let's do ukramedia.com. And let's do Control Alt Home to center the pivot point. You do have to center the pivot point, and then Control Home to center it in the composition. So now that I have it in my composition like this, obviously I don't have to center it. I can put it anywhere. And then what I have to do, all I got to do is just go to the smartREKT and press on this button, and it will create a shape based on my text here, which is super awesome. And now I can quickly adjust like this, and it's great. You can also bring in images. For example, let's see if I have something here. I do have, let's do this ukramedia. So I have an image. I can press on it, and you can see it does the exact same thing. You can go over here and kind of extrude things. So it works on pretty much everything, and you can get something that you need quickly. And I've used it for lower thirds. I've used it for a lot of things. So if you're in the business of working with shape layers, I highly recommend smartREKT, and you can get it at ukramedia.com/smartREKT. All right, thank you so much for watching this tutorial. I really hope you found it useful. And normally by this point, what I say is this: like our video, share it, subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on social media. And again, all of that is great, and you should still probably do that. However, what would benefit us even more if you subscribe to our mailing list. That's right, it's something you'll see at the bottom of this video, or somewhere on the page, you'll see an option to where you can subscribe to our mailing list. And what that does, it gives us an opportunity to reach you with any kind of content that we post, whether it's podcasts or really anything that we're doing. With YouTube, you'll only get notified when we create a tutorial. However, that's not all we do. We do a lot more. And on Facebook, it's tough. You know, we worked really hard to generate the following, but when you post, it only reaches the people, you know, a certain amount of people, and then you have to pay to reach the rest of your followers, which is so odd. And by you subscribing to our mailing list, you would actually give us power to reach everybody. And so that's what we really would like for you to do. So if you don't mind, subscribe to our mailing list, and we promise you we will not spam you, unless you think spamming you would be, you know, notifying you of the stuff that we're doing. If you think that's spam, then yeah, we will spam you. But other than that, we won't. And until next time, my name is Sergey Prakhnevsky, and this is ukramedia.com.